So we're on lesson 10 now, 10 out of 12. So this is lesson 10, and then lesson 11 is going to be another class, and then lesson 12 we're going to have kind of like a class exam, and it's going to be 1 hour so we can fit everything in one class, and also because on that Saturday it's Christmas weekend, so I think you guys should all relax. So we're going to have a 1 hour lesson for lesson number 12. So just letting you guys know. Okay, our agenda looks short, but it's a bunch of new topics, so yeah. We're going to learn something called motive, repetition, and sequence. Then we're going to do a musical analysis, and then we're going to finish up our classical periods. So we did romantic last time, so now we're doing contemporary. Okay, so music often has patterns in their note structure, and today we're going to be exploring the theme of a musical piece and different ways to express that theme throughout the music. So what is a motive? A motive, or I think it's also pronounced motif, is a short group of notes used in a piece of music. The composer uses this motif as the main idea of the music and repeats it in many different ways. So for example, this is a very famous piece. Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 uses this motif. I'm going to circle it here. It's 3 eighth notes and then a long note. And I'm sure you guys have all heard this. We're going to listen to a small section so you guys can hear how that motif is repeated many times. So see if you can hear and understand how it's repeated. I'm going to play the video now. Okay, so you guys get the idea, right? Basically 3 short notes and 1 long note, and he does that for a big part of the first movement. I'm gonna erase the circle now. Okay, so this is the sheet music, the piano version, and you can see that much easier here. So here's the motif again, I just circled it. And there's many different variations. So for example, this one is pretty similar. And then we can find another one here, another one here. And if we go on, this also counts because it's 3 short notes and then a long note. So yeah, you guys get the idea. The motif, if a composer uses one, they often repeat it many times in different ways throughout the piece. Okay, so now we're gonna do one on our own. And a motif doesn't have to be the same length as the example we saw. It could be like 2 measures, or I don't think it should be any more than 2 measures, but like they can be different lengths. So keep that in mind when doing the exercise. Okay, so I know you guys can all annotate. So does anyone want to try and circle the motif below? Okay, good. So Camilla said the first measure, so I'll circle that for her. Does anyone else want to give a try? And you guys can just draw. You don't have to like ask me. Okay, and remember to, circle though. Okay, so you guys think it's only the second measure?
There's like 2, like.
No, both of them combined.
Okay, yes, exactly. So there is only one motif. I'm gonna try to get a different color. Actually, I don't know how to do that, so never mind. So the motif, I'm going to erase all of these, is actually the entire first 2 measures. Because as we can see in measure 3 and 4, it's the same rhythm repeated again. And the reason I only circle the treble clef is because the motif is like the melody, so the bass clef doesn't count. So does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, the reason it's not only the first one is because like the second measure is repeated as well. So yeah, but good job. Yay. Okay, so now we're gonna go into the different modes. I'll go over two of them and then Ifan will go over the other two. So the first type is repetition. One way of replaying the motif is simply to repeat it, and repetition takes place when the motif is repeated immediately, exactly the way it was the first time it occurred. Pay attention to that word immediately because it's only repetition if you do it like one after the other. It's not repetition if you play it once, wait a few measures, and do it again. So keep that in mind. So this example is a pretty hard, it might be hard to understand, but the melody is actually in this little thing down here. And the melody is just the C and the D. So the motif would be this, and it's repeated the exact same way here. And it just so happens that this part, the piano part, also repeats, but as long as the motif is repeated immediately afterwards, then it counts as repetition. Does that make sense to everyone? Yay, okay. And we'll have easier examples. I just thought of this piece, so. Okay, so now we have practice. I'm sure this is a very familiar piece to some of you guys. So, okay, let's first identify the motif and then we'll find if there's repetition. So for those of you who can annotate, circle the motif of this section. And if you don't know, just take a guess. Okay, I see two answers so far.
The orange line.
Okay, got it. So the first measure.
Yeah.
Okay, so very good answers, but the right answer is
actually the two measures.
Okay, good job. The motif is the first two measures. Because as you can see, we have a similar rhythm here. But yeah, I can definitely see this one is actually a pretty hard example because the first measure, it's 1 quarter note and then 4 eighth notes, and you see that here like many times. So I guess you could argue that that could be the motif as well. But in this case, I'm just taking the next two measures as my like justification. Okay, so now that we know the motif, is there repetition in this piece? Yes or no? Type in the chat.
Yeah, I'd say yes.
Okay, so we have 2 yeses and 1 no. Iris, do you want to take a guess?
Yes? I don't know.
Okay, so we have 3 yeses and 1 no. Well, the 1 no is correct. This is not repetition because, as we said in the last slide, repetition is when the exact same thing is repeated again. So, and it's repeated immediately. So those are the two components. We do have the repeated immediately part because this is the first, this is the motif, and then immediately afterwards, we see a similar thing. But the reason why it's not repetition is because they're different notes. Okay, so in the first measure, it's D, G, A, B, C, D, G, G. And then in the third measure, it's E, C, D, E, F sharp, G. And those are not the same notes, obviously, so this is not repetition. Does that make sense? Yeah. And even if you said the motive is only this part, there's no repetition either because the next measure doesn't have that. So does that make sense? There's no repetition in this piece? Okay, let's go a little bit quicker. I'm just gonna call on someone for this one. First, identify the motif.
Okay. This. Oh no, I circled too much. No. This thing.
Very good. Yes, that is the motif. And is that repetition?
Yes.
Very good, because as you can see, the next measure is the exact same thing. So that is the motif, and then you can see it repeated again. And the bass clef is also the same, so that will help you get your answer. Okay, good. Yeah, it's repeated 2 times before it changes. Okay, so that was repetition. Repetition is pretty straightforward. So this one is called sequence. A sequence occurs when the motif is repeated immediately, but on a different note, usually a second or a third higher or lower. So let's look at an example of this very famous violin piece. It's Paganini Caprice 24. So there is one motif in the beginning. It's like this one, but we're not going to look at that. We're looking at the one after that. So the motif is going to be, well, the things I sort. This is the motif. So it's like an 8th note and then 5/16 notes with a rest in the middle. And then we can see that repeated when it goes down. So that is a sequence. Wait, actually, you could also argue that the motif is this whole thing. I think that actually makes more sense. So ignore my circles from before. So this is the first time it's played. It's A, something, F, and then the second time it goes G, and then E. So it's one step lower because it starts on G and that one starts on A. And then it repeats one more time. This time it starts on F. So can you guys see that that's like steadily going lower? So that is a sequence. It's not repetition because they're not being repeated. Okay, and this one we're not really gonna go into that much detail, but it's just something good to know. There's 2 different types of sequences. This is an ordinary sequence when the melodic phrase is repeated at a higher pitch, but they don't preserve the same intervals. Remember, we learned intervals. So this is like C, E, G, F, E, and then you go higher, D, F, A, G, F, and then between C and E is a major third, but between D and F is a minor third. So we didn't preserve the exact same intervals when we're doing the sequence. But in a real sequence, we preserve the intervals. So as you can see here, C to E is a major third, and then D to F sharp is a major third. And we continue adding whatever accidentals we need to preserve that like interval. So that's just something cool to know. Okay, so this is imitation, and yeah, I think Ifan, you can go on for this part.
Okay, so imitation is very similar to sequence and repetition. Imitation is a repetition of a melody shortly after its first appearance in a different voice. Many Baroque pieces will have because of its polyphonic texture. So let's look at this example of a piece by Bach. So as you can see here, the first circle is the first melody, and then you go down to the second voice in the bass clef and you find the melody repeated, just in a different voice. Okay, so we're going to review all the stuff that we've learned. A motif is a short group of notes that act as the main idea of the music, and it can be repeated in many different ways. Repetition is repeating the motif immediately the same way it's played in the first time. Sequence is repeating the motif immediately a second or third lower than it's played in the first time. And imitation is repeating the motif immediately but in a different voice. Alright, so let's practice. Identify the motif and whether there is repetition, sequence, or imitation. So, Camellia, or anyone, just like imitate where the motif is and then just say whether it's an imitation, sequence, or repetition. Know where the motif is. Okay, yeah, that is where the motif is, where your circle is. Okay, so now, do you see a repetition, sequence, or imitation? Yeah, it is a repetition. Okay, good job. Okay, now identify the motif and whether there is repetition, sequence, or imitation. Can you find the motif first?
This thing, and it is
Just a comment. For these exercises, you don't always have to look in the very first measure. You should look for some kind of pattern within the piece and then find the first instance of that pattern. That's like just a helpful thing.
Okay, so Iris, that was close for the 8th note and then 2/16 notes, but they're not really repeated in the second line or anywhere else. Okay, the orange circle, that was really close. Does anyone else want to give it a shot?
Can anyone find any pattern in this section?
Okay, as another hint, I would say look in the second line. Okay, don't circle the whole thing. Just circle like a measure.
Okay, Camellia has her hand raised.
Is it like the second half of the second line?
Wait, the second half?
Yeah.
So, like, this? Wait, can you... Yeah, okay,
Line of first measure.
okay, so second line, first measure, and then what else?
It's the G, 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 G.
Just those 4 notes or anything after that?
It's just the 4 notes.
Okay, very good guess. These 4 Gs. Wait, okay. I'm gonna circle one of the... Okay, if you guys don't know the motif, can you at least say if there's repetition, sequence, or imitation? Might be easy to tell for this piece.
sequence.
Very good, yeah. There is sequence because you can see like the pattern going down. Okay, for this example, I realized it's kind of hard because the motif is actually split between 2 measures. So that's a hint. Okay, so it actually starts here and it ends here. Does that make sense? And then it's repeated here. That's how you include the whole thing. Otherwise, it's not repeated immediately. Does that make sense? Okay, and then this is the third one. And then it repeats again, but the excerpt, the picture ends there. So does that make sense that it's a sequence? And the motif, yeah. Sometimes you have to get creative when looking for the motif. It's not always gonna be at the beginning of the excerpt. It might even be split between 2 measures like it is here. But yeah, good job, guys. Let's go on. This one's kind of hard, but okay. Does anybody want to try to find the motif? Motive? I guess you can make an argument for 2 sections in this piece. Okay, does anyone want to take a guess? Remember, like, look for a pattern first and then try to find the first instance of that pattern. There's actually 2 motifs in here that you could use, so that, I guess that makes your chances of getting it right better. Does anyone want to take a guess?
The third, fourth, fifth, and sixth measure.
Is that the motif, or is that one of the other versions of it? Is that the first time where that occurs? Or is it this one? Yes, very good.
That one.
Good. Okay, so yeah, good job, everyone. This was another hard example, but you guys all got it. And actually, both of these are the same type of either this, that, or that. So are these motifs repeated? Is it a sequence or is it an imitation? Or neither? You can take a guess for that one as well.
Wait, what's...
Okay, I see an answer in the chat. We're almost running low on time, so... Okay, so Dylan said sequence, and that is correct for both of them. As you can see here, the notes, if you can see me type, it's F, A, F, and then here it's G flat, B flat, G flat. So every note went up a half step, so that's a sequence. And it keeps going, hold on, let me close this tab. And it's gonna keep going up. See, now it's G natural, B natural, and G. So can you see that those 3 notes are going up steadily, which is a sequence? Yeah. And then the second one, it may be a bit harder to tell, but you can definitely see that this thingy is repeated again. We have A, D, F, and then everything here is up a half step. Yeah, so that's also a sequence. Okay, very good. That one was a bit harder, but you guys got it, so. Let me see. Okay, let's just go over this one together. So this one is sequence and imitation. So as you can remember, imitation is when the motif is repeated in a different voice. So actually in this example, the motif is the very first set of notes. D, E, F, G, A, C sharp, A. And then if you look in the bass clef, it's repeated the exact same way. So that's imitation. So if you had something in the treble clef and then in the bass clef, it's repeated but not the same way, that wouldn't be imitation. So it's basically repetition but in another voice. So this is imitation. Just gonna write an I there. And can you guys find which measures the sequences are? That's a good example. Yeah, this is like a tiny sequence, I guess. Okay, but okay, the sequence is here. As you can see, it's going down from A and then stops there. And you can kind of tell from these symbols, they're repeated many times. So that's an indication of a pattern. And then it goes down from G here, from F here, and then from E here. Okay, yeah. Does that make sense to everyone? This is the sequence part. Okay, good. Yeah, in Baroque music, which is Scarlatti, you're gonna see a lot of imitation and sequence. Yay. So that, we'll just do that next class. But I'm sure you guys can do this. We'll put it in your homework. And I think we'll just do this in the study session on Saturday, but the contemporary era is very interesting, so be excited to learn about it. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm not gonna put any homework from the contemporary era in this one. I'll just put a bunch of practices for the stuff we learned. Oh, this is the type of contemporary music. It's pretty interesting, so yeah. And this is vocabulary. Just focus on the first 4. The other ones are all stuff from the contemporary period, so don't worry about those. Okay, does anyone have any questions for me or Ifan? Okay, we went a little bit over time today, but hopefully you guys understand the material we did. Especially if you're gonna be doing composing or improvising, the stuff we learned today is very important to know. So yeah. Okay, if there's no questions, then we'll send you the homework and slides soon, and we'll see you on Saturday. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.